Well, thanks, Kelsey. So what we're going to do today is really cover what's new in Power BI in perhaps the last few months or so. If you guys are probably well aware, you're already using Power BI. There's updates every month to the desktop, to data gateway. There could be new support for data sources, new feature functionality on the desktop side or even on the Power BI services side. We're going to concentrate more on the Power BI desktop side for this particular session. And I just handpicked a few of topics in Power BI Desktop, which I thought would really enhance a lot of our dashboards and reports. And some of the topics, if where I picked them because in other tools you actually need some JavaScript to do that type of functionality, but in Power BI it's all out of the box. So we're going to go through some various new feature functionality within Power BI Desktop for this particular session for today. Now, just a little bit of background about myself. My name is Imran Berkey. I'm a BI solution architect here with StoneRidge Software. I have over about 12 years of experience in BI reporting, ETL, dimensional modeling, data warehousing in a number of different industries and a number of different tool sets as well. Most recently, for the past year or so, I've been concentrating a lot on Power BI, and I will be conducting the demonstration today. And thanks everybody for joining. And for those of you who are actually at our StoneRidge Connect, this is going to be somewhat similar to what you saw in Connect, but because Connect was last month, now in May, there's been a couple more updates. I did change the slides up a little bit to reflect the latest updates for May in Power BI Desktop. So a little bit of background about who StoneRidge Software is. We now currently have about 3 offices, and there's one in Barnesville, which is our headquarters. We have a Minneapolis office. We also have a Fargo office. We're a Microsoft Gold certified partner, and we cover really the entire gamut of the Microsoft Dynamics solutions, everything from AX to 365, GP, NAV, and CRM, and of course Power BI. And we also do data warehousing as well. We have about 100 plus team members that exclusively focus on the Microsoft ecosystem and set of products. So that's who we are in terms of StoneRidge Software, just in case you guys weren't aware of or haven't heard of us previously. But so going on into the actual agenda for today, what we'll take a look at first are some of the new enhancements and features that Power BI Desktop has to offer. So the first thing is we'll go into Report Page Tooltips. We'll discover how we can synchronize slicers across multiple pages or multiple dashboards in the desktop. We'll take a look at quick measures. This is a great way for us to create metrics on the fly without understanding any DAX, and we'll talk about what DAX is and the benefits of doing something like a quick measure. Next, in the May update, there's actually been conditional formatting by different field and also doing measure drill throughs. So the format of this is really going to be, I'm going to go into PowerPoint. We'll talk about each of these individually in PowerPoint first. And I might go a little bit quick in PowerPoint because I want you guys to actually see this live in Power BI Desktop. So once we go through these slides in PowerPoint, we'll then do a demonstration of each of these topics in the desktop. Okay. So the first topic is Report Page Tooltips. Now, what this enables us to do is really provide us, I like to call it kind of like a mini dashboard. So when you hover over a particular bar chart, for example, in this case, and if you wanted to see more details around the numbers, in our example, we're looking at sales by customer geography. But if we wanted to see the revenue trend of the sales by geography, and we didn't want to create a different dashboard for it, and maybe that's all we just wanted to see, we can create a custom report page tooltip. So when we hover over a particular region or dimension, that's going to automatically filter that tooltip based off of whatever we just hovered over. In this example, we're just looking at revenue trend of the Eastern region, and we are also seeing year-to-date and quarter-to-date revenue. Now, report page tooltips, the way it works in Power BI Desktop is there's a new page template or page size template called a tooltip, which is what we're going to use as a starting point. That's going to enable Power BI to recognize that that page is a tooltip. Couple important things to note is tooltips right now are in preview only mode, so we're going to need to turn these on when we're in desktop. And they are not supported when you're viewing reports in mobile apps, embedded environments, published to web, or supported, and it's not supported for custom visuals. So just a few important things to know regarding report page tooltips. Next topic is synchronizing of slicers. So this is pretty cool because what this enables you to do is really to synchronize slicers across multiple pages within the Power BI desktop. Okay, so what you can do is you can specify whether each slicer should be applied to an individual report page and whether it should be visible on that page or not. And if the slicers, like in this example, we have about 5 different slicers, we can just cherry pick whichever one we want to bring into the separate dashboard page, and it'll automatically bring that over, and we'll see that in an example. So the slicer doesn't even have to exist in the target page or the next page. You can bring it in, or you can just make it invisible. The way you would enable this in Power BI now is there's a sync slicers pane where you would define how each slicer is applied across the various pages in the report. And one thing to know also is so if you delete a slicer on this page and you have it synchronized to another page in Power BI, that won't automatically delete. So you're going to have to go into the other page and delete it. So there's certain things that don't really get synchronized, but for the most part, everything does. And quick measures. If you guys aren't familiar with these, this is actually now generally available, so it's no longer in preview mode. That happened in February 2018. What quick measures allow us to do is to quickly and easily perform a lot of calculations on our metrics. So a lot of time intelligence calculations like year to date, quarter to date. I use this sometimes when I do percent differences, just because I don't feel like entering in some DAX code. So percent differences, you can do things like that, or aggregations like summarizations and averages, or you can even do basic arithmetic or concatenation of strings. What quick measures is going to do in the back end is basically create and run a set of DAX commands. And if we're not familiar with what DAX is, DAX stands for data analysis expressions. It's the way in Power BI you would create your own custom calculations, and it's a very, very powerful set of functions that we have within DAX that enable us to do this. But quick measures puts that more in a black box because we don't need to know how to write DAX. We can create quick measures on the fly within our Power BI reports. And this is also actually a great way for us to maybe just start learning a little bit more about DAX, because some of the very advanced metrics or calculations you might need to do, you can't necessarily use quick measure for. But when you create the quick measure, you can actually see the DAX behind the scenes and get a good understanding of how you would actually create this from scratch. So in our example, we're going to create just a basic quarter to date total revenue quick measure. And I'll show you guys first how I created it just by using DAX functions, and then we'll actually go into the quick measure and create it ourselves. And this feature, now the next two features are actually that occurred in the latest May release of Power BI Desktop. So the first one we'll take a look at is conditional formatting by a different field. This gives us the ability to format columns by using a different field within our data set. So previously, before May, Power BI's version, you could only do conditional formatting on items that are numeric and only on items that are listed in your table. What happened now, what Power BI's update on this side now is, now what you can do is you can actually pick a different field from your data set to base conditional formatting off of. So it doesn't have to be visible in this table. The other cool thing here is that you can even do conditional formatting on text. So we're going to do that exactly here. So we'll do a conditional formatting on the customer name that's going to be based off of sales profit. So customer name is a text, but sales profit is not even visible in our, or we didn't include it in the table, but we want to see some highlighting on our customer name based off of profit. So we're going to add that in here. So you might want to do something like this if you have limited real estate and or you don't want to add an extra measure, but you want to conditionally format some items in here. This is a perfect way to do that. The one thing also to note is the conditional formatting has to be based off of a numeric value. Okay, so it can't be based off of like a particular city or something like that. So you have to base your conditional formatting off of a numeric value to format on. And the last thing we'll talk about in this PowerPoint before we get into Power BI Desktop is what's called what they're calling a measure drill through. Now, previously, drill through was actually just limited in what you're looking in the bottom right-hand corner in that drill through filters field pane. So there was no way to carry like entire filter context or slicers from your source to target pages. Now what you can do is you have the ability to, if you see pass all filters, if you enable that toggle there is going to actually pass all of the filtered criteria from your source to your target. So all of the slicers that we don't have in the drill through pane in our target report, those are going to be passed over. So we're going to see an example of that. And so that is all we're going to show in terms of the feature functionality in desktop. As I mentioned, there is a lot of updates that have occurred. I think these particular ones are a good area to focus on. So I guess while I transition into Power BI Desktop, Kelsey, have there been any anything in the chat in terms of questions?
No, you're doing great. No questions at this time.
Okay. Okay, so now we're going to get into Power BI Desktop mode. The first thing we'll talk about is Report Page Tooltips. Right now, what I'm looking at is a dashboard of our top 10 customers. So we have various slicers by year, purchase type, and customer type. We have some KPIs that we might be interested in on top hand side. We have sales revenue and quantity by customer name, and on the bottom, it's broken out by category and just some details around the customer. Now, the tooltip, if I hover over, like, it's actually not enabled right now. So the way that we would enable the tooltip is right now, let's say if I hover over this particular customer and I want to see additional details around it, this is what our tooltips used to look like. You could have added, some additional metrics here, but it would just be static text like this, right? Now, with the update within February of Power BI, there's a new tooltip drop down here within the format section, and what you do is you turn it on and you select your page. So right now I have a tooltip, and now I can come back over here, and if I hover over any item in my bar chart, I see that revenue trend for my customer and my year-to-date, quarter-to-date numbers. And if I go into another customer, you notice that numbers are changing, right? So it's all dynamically based off of whatever customer or whatever item that I hover over. Now, the way that you create this tooltip, and a lot of the content actually that we're going to cover is going to be pretty simple, and just for demonstration purposes, we're going to keep it that way. But even if you weren't doing this for demo purposes, you were doing this out in the real world, a lot of this is actually very simplified experience. So the way to create a tooltip is we go into just creating a brand new page. We're going to call it a demo tooltip. Once we do that, there's a format area in our page, and the page information, we want to specify this page to be a tooltip. So this is telling Power BI that, this is only going to be a tooltip page, and we want the page size also to reflect that. Now, once we did that, you notice that the area or the canvas shrunk a little bit. So the next thing is we also want to change the page view to be actual size. And now it's really shrunk a lot. And we want to do this because we have very limited space when we're creating tooltips. And if we didn't do this and we just kept it to the view that it was originally, and we just started adding our visuals onto the canvas and they're not in this white area here, you won't even see them when you hover over. So it's critical you tell Power BI that first the page information is a tooltip, size the page as a tooltip, and also go into your page view and look at the actual size. Now, what we do here, once we've set up our page to be a tooltip, now we can just simply start creating our report that we had earlier. So what we'll do is we'll bring in our date hierarchy, and we'll bring in our sales amount. Okay. And this was actually a line chart. And we'll drill down just to see a little bit more detail. And I'm going to format this a little bit just to make it kind of visually represent what we saw earlier. So we'll just change the background colors a little bit, and it looks like the background color didn't get carried over. So I'm just going to take it from my previous title here. So if you guys aren't familiar, or if you haven't really formatted a lot of your charts, this is a great way to actually just format them as well, and take a look at different color schemes. So you can have custom colors and custom titles here as well, just to make it look a little bit more visually appealing. And then the next thing is we have a couple quarter to date and year to date metrics. I've already created these, so we're going to bring in our sales revenue year to date, and we're going to convert that into a chart. Give this a label as well, and we'll just call it year to date revenue. And I'm just going to format this so it looks a little bit better. And let's shrink this down to maybe size font 18. And we had another metric for our quarter to date revenue because we want to see how we're doing year to date and quarter to date. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it so I don't have to redo all of that formatting. And I bring in my quarter to date revenue amount, and I'm just going to change the title to be quarter to date revenue. Okay, so now we created our tooltip here. Okay, but what do we do next, right? We created the page, we let Power BI know that this is a tooltip. We're going to come back into our top 10 customers, and this is where we want to apply the tooltip. So we'll go back into format and our tooltip area, and then we created a demo tooltip. Okay, so once we do that, now let's hover over something, and you notice now our new tooltip has been created. It's not pointing to the old one. Now, with tooltips, you can only have one at a time. You can't have more than one tooltip. That's just a limitation here within Power BI. So that's really, how easy it is to create a tooltip. Just to recap, what we did is we created a new page. We specified that page to be a tooltip, and we formatted the size of the page to look at the actual size. We created our visuals, and then we came back into our visual where we want to apply it, and we just applied the tooltip, and it's there. Okay, and that's really the process you would do to create the tooltips. The next item we're going to look at is the synchronization of slicers. Okay, so I have a number of slicers here. If I go into my product revenue by sales region, now this is a different chart. This essentially just shows us revenue by region, my top 5 products, and the trend of the revenue by year, quarter, and region. But I want to bring in additional slicers in here, and I want to synchronize them with my top 10 customers. So if I select a year, for example, or if I select a category, product category, I want to make sure that's going to get synchronized. But I also want those slicers onto that page. So the way I would do that is there's a Sync Slicers button, a checkbox here under View. If we click on that, you notice now this pane comes up. And if we go into a slicer and we highlight the slicer, so in this case we highlighted year, we're going to add a copy of the slicer onto that page there that we had earlier, and it's going to create a slicer group called year. Let's do the same thing with category. Okay, So what this is doing now is actually adding slicers to that page and synchronizing them. So if I come back into my page, you notice they're added in the exact placement where we saw them, but we'll just put them up here for now. So these are our two slicers that we added. And let's just make sure they're going to get synchronized. Okay, so if we exit out of our Synching Slicers, if we select year 2014, and let's check action figures of our categories. So now we're doing some analysis on our 2014 sales of action figures. If we go into our top 10 customers, you notice now the year and category is filtered by whatever I selected. And I can do the same thing. So now next I want to check out arts and crafts for 2014. Now you've noticed 2014 arts and crafts is still there, or is has been changed, but the year is left. So that's really the way you would synchronize the slicers, is essentially just going into your view, going into the slicers pane and adding them, and applying the synchronization of slicers that way. And for syncing slicers, it's really that easy. So the last two things that we just saw, the synchronization of slicers and uh, tooltips, like those customized tooltips. In other reporting tools, I had to do something like this, and this involved a lot of custom JavaScript, right? The great thing with Power BI is you can actually now, it provides you with the functionality to do this out of the box. Before there wasn't really an easy way for us to do this, but now with just a few clicks, we can get to more enhanced feature functionality within our dashboards. Okay, now that's
Imran, we did
yes.
question. Oh, we did have one question come in. If I could just interject here. For Power BI Desktop, can we
Mhm.
connect to data marks in Hive? If yes, how is the performance when going against larger data sets, such as fact tables with multi-million records?
So, you mean Hive? Connecting to Hive? Is that the question?
That is the question.
Okay, Hive is really it's a language, right? It's not really a data source, but behind the scenes, what Power BI would probably do. So I'm assuming you're going to connect to a Hadoop instance. So I personally haven't done that yet, but there is a way to do that within Power BI. A lot of the um, performance is really going to depend on whether or not, how many rows are in Power BI and how you're importing it, or if I don't know if you can do a live connection to Hadoop, but if you import it within Power BI there, and it's hard to tell when things are really going to go awry in terms of the amount of data. So a lot of times what I do when I'm at a client site is really just take it step by step, or just bring in like a year's worth of data and see how that'll perform. um, but me personally, I don't know. That kind of question is just a little hard to tell in terms of how it's going to perform or how things will perform within Power BI. Because if you're going against Hadoop, right, and you're going to import that data in Power BI, well, now it doesn't matter if it's Hadoop or if it's SQL Server, the data is imported in Power BI. Now, in terms of how the refresh rate and stuff like that is going to get, how long that'll take, it's really hard to tell. There's a lot of factors that go on into that. It could be bandwidth. There could be, if you're having Power BI Premium, there's, that's dedicated capacity. Things might be a lot easier if you have Power BI Premium versus Power BI Pro, right? Or just regular Power BI. There's also Power BI Report Server. So if you're bringing that data on premise rather than in the cloud, there might be some advantages or disadvantages to that. So, there are limitations, and there are some performance implications when you're going against any data source. But I don't know. I can't really speak in terms of whether, if Hadoop is going to be quicker or slower right now. I think that's something, maybe if you do have that kind of use case, I would encourage you to actually just try it out and see how it works out. And then if it doesn't, there's other options you can take.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
That is all for now. Thanks, Imran.
Yep, you're welcome. Oh, one other thing, actually, now that we are actually on the question, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but there is a way to incrementally refresh data sets now in Power BI. So that this is only available in premium mode only. So, and it's in preview. So there's limitations to it, but there is a way to do an incremental refresh on your data set within the Power BI service when you're in premium. So if you do have some large data sets, and instead of doing just the complete refresh of the data, Power BI does enable you to do an incremental refresh now in premium mode only. So that can, alleviate some of the performance concerns that you guys might have when going against large data sets. Okay, now going back into Power BI desktop, we saw report page tooltips and we saw the synchronization of slicers. The next topic is going to be a quick measure. And I'm going to come into my top 10 customers again. And we have KPIs here. We saw earlier revenue year to date, total revenue, sales profit, and quantity. Now we want to create a quarter to date metric. And the way we would do that normally is go into our sales fact table. And I already created a quarter to date metric here called sales revenue. And the way I did it is using the DAX time intelligence function called total QTD and just doing a sum on the amount and rolling it up by date. Now, if we didn't know how to do this, we can come into here, or if we just didn't feel like doing it, what we could do is we can go into our sales, we right click our fact table. Now there's a new quick measure selection. And once that pops up, it popped up in my other monitor for some reason. I don't know why it does that, but anyway, it does pop up and it gives us a series of calculations that we can do on our measures. In our example, we'll do a quarter to date total. And now the base value is going to be the value that we're going to want to aggregate. So we're going to do sales amount. Now, and the date is how we want to roll that up by. Basically, we need a date dimension here, or a date field. The date, it has to be formatted as a date. If it's not formatted as a date, then this won't work. But in our example, we do have a field that's formatted as a date. So we're just going to bring in our sales amount in the base value and the date in our date value. And once we do that, we click on OK. A new metric is going to show up, and I already created one earlier today, but this is our new metric called sales amount quarter to date. We can rename this if we wanted to. We'll just leave it the way it is. If I highlight that, you can take a look now at some of the DAX that goes behind the scenes, right? Now, these two we can kind of just ignore, but this is like, I would say like a clean way of doing a calculation. The last item here where you see total QTD and the sum is exactly what we saw earlier when I created the DAX calculation already beforehand. But you notice it did the same exact thing, but it just added some error handling to it on the top here. So I think a great way for us, if we're, sometimes, like I said, I use this sometimes, but sometimes there might be some instances where you just, if you're just learning Power BI and DAX up front, this is a great way to learn it, because now you easily create the metric, but you can even see what it's doing behind the scenes. Okay. And now we can, drag and drop it in here if we wanted to. So you could take a look at what it's doing. Right now, it's not showing us any data because it's 2014. We've got it filtered on 2014. But if we wanted to bring it into our, into our report, we could do that, and we can format it whatever way we wanted to. But I'm just going to remove it for now, because I just wanted to show you guys how you would actually create a quick measure within Power BI desktop. So again, very easy, right? A lot of stuff is not really, programming anything or doing any kind of specialized functions. It's just understanding where things are and where to click really right now within all of the functionality that we're looking at. And the next thing is, let's take a look at the drill throughs. And this is actually going to go really quick because there's not much you would do in this particular area of making sure that everything carries over within a source to target drill through. And in our example, we're going to use this out as our source, top 10 customers. We have a list of our sales revenue by our top 10 customers, but we want to see some purchase order detail history around that. And we have a tab over here called purchase order history. Right now, I already had a drill through on here, and we have a drill through that's based off of only the customer name and nothing else, right? So there's no other extra filter criteria that's applied here. What we did is we already have this keep all filters set to on. So once that happens, it's going to tell Power BI to pass over every slicer and every filter criteria from the source into the target. So if we come back into our top 10 customers and we select 2015, and maybe we want to take a look at our repeat customers for the year of 2015 and in our arts and crafts category, and maybe we want to see how Frankie's doing, and that's one of our top customers. We want to see its purchase order history. Now what it did is we drilled through to the report. You notice that it's filtered on Frankie there. And if I go into my drill through filters here, I only had customer name. That's the only thing that we had in our drill through. But you notice now all the slicers are carried over in here as well. Okay, if I didn't want to do that, I can just click off and only the name would carry over. But in our example, we want to keep everything the same. Maybe we don't want to add any slicers here. This is just a detail level report that we see whenever we drill through on. And now all the slicers are being carried over. Okay, and for doing drill through, it's really just that simple. You know, if you don't have your slicers here, or if you don't have something that's displayed in the report, but you still want it to filter on based off of the source report, you can do that now by enabling keep all filters. And the final thing we'll talk about is our conditional formatting. Okay, right now, if we look at our customer details, we have a customer name conditionally formatted, and this is a text, right? So previously we weren't able to do this, but now with the latest release in May of Power BI, we can conditionally format the customer name based off of anything that we see in this table, but it can also be something that's not present in this table. So the way we would do conditional formatting is go into select our table. Within the format area, we have a conditional formatting, and here we can select what field we want to conditionally format on. In our case, we'll do customer name. Now I'm going to turn that font color off because right now this is how it would originally look if I didn't have any conditional formatting on the table. So right now there's nothing, and we want to apply conditional formatting on that text based off of sales profit, for example. So what we do is we come into here, we enable the font color, and once we enable that font color, this conditional formatting pane comes up. We're going to apply the conditional formatting to customer name. It's going to be based off of, now here is the difference between what before the May release is where we can actually take a look and base the conditional formatting off of some other metric that's not even available within our table. This example is going to be based off of the sum of sales profit. And I already know that $2,500 is a low number for sales profit by customer. So I'm just going to hard code that into here, and I'll leave everything the way it is as right now. So once I do that, now everything's been conditionally formatted based off of the profit. Now you can't see the profit in here; it's not in here. But if you did have the need to, you know, if you were kind of stuck on the real estate and you didn't want to necessarily see it, but you wanted to conditionally highlight it just to give some anomaly detection in here, you can do that by using conditional formatting by completely different column. And now we're doing it on text. We're not doing the conditional formatting on a numeric value. but but it has to be a numeric value for us to do conditional formatting on. Okay. Kelsey, any questions in the pane there?
We do not have any additional questions at this time. Looks like you're covering it all pretty well.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was really all we had in terms of the presentation. There was a lot of material to cover. In the Power BI desktop, we looked at maybe I think 5 or 6 different feature functionality. But again, the great thing with that, I think the reason why it was quick is because these things aren't very complex to do, and that's one of the great things with Power BI, right? A lot of this content, I mean, I think they're making it a lot easier for non-developer like folks to actually get in and start creating and empowering them. So a lot of the material that we saw is really that, even with creating the measures, now they have a quick measure way of doing it instead of us trying to Google and see what DAX is and what functions we can use. So that's really going to be the end of the workshop, guys. And again, if you do have any more questions on some of the content we saw, or even other questions that's not related to the content, here's my work email address. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to answer any more questions outside of whatever you guys saw today, even things that are beyond the scope of what's new in Power BI. We can certainly help out with that. And if you do have need for more kind of customized training or just generic Power BI training, StoneRidge Software, we do offer a couple of different varieties of Power BI workshops. So we have basic workshop that's really kind of shows you from an end-to-end perspective of just using the Microsoft Contasso database of how to the entire life cycle of Power BI. So how do you bring in data sources? How do you do some data wrangling and data blending, and then creating the visuals and then publishing it out onto the service? We have some custom Power BI workshops as well, where either we can connect to your data sources directly, or you provide us with a series of CSV files, and we customize the visuals based off of some of the requirements that we heard from um, from your organization, and we'll do more of a custom workshop that way. Another option is a quick start. So this is kind of like a mini engagement. So for you guys, if you do have some additional material or additional use cases that you want implemented in Power BI within the 2-week time frame, we can come on site and we can gather a lot of those requirements and use cases and work hand in hand with you and your analysts and your IT folks and some of the other people that are going to be involved in Power BI, and we can start getting you guys up and running with a series of dashboards and reports within Power BI. And we'll do this hand in hand, right? And then at the end of the about latter half of the 2 weeks, it'll be more of a formalized knowledge transfer to your organization, so that you guys already have some Power BI dashboards up and running. And this will be a great way to start now productionalizing the Power BI implementation. But it gives you a great head start, okay, in your Power BI implementation, and it's a great way to get some on the job training.